Hello everybody, I'm Paul Sudnick, and in this meeting we're going to talk about the value chain way of approaching an analysis of competitor advantage. We've spoken a lot in the previous meetings about competitive advantage, and the goal of competitive strategy is to achieve sustainable competitive advantage, as we saw in the last meeting in the VRIO model that we looked at, by pursuing what Porter calls one of the generic strategies. And his generic strategies are essentially either cost leadership, where we do things at low cost, or differentiation, where we do things better. So I think as an example of cost leadership, we generally today look at low-cost supermarkets. Here in Germany, we have Aldi and Lidl, who really pursue cost leadership strategies when facing their competitors, Edeka or Rewe. If we look at differentiation, we might take the Swiss example of Rolex or Patek Philippe watches, which essentially fulfill the same function as a digital Japanese Seiko watch, but cost many more times the price. We could expect to buy a Seiko watch, I don't know, for maybe 50 Swiss francs today, whilst a Patek Philippe entry model would probably cost you in the order of 20,000 Swiss francs today. But although the two products fulfill the same objective, they show you the time, one is very different in terms of quality and engineering content than the other. In terms of cost leadership, going back to the example of Aldi and Lidl, both of those supermarkets achieve cost leadership basically by managing their inventory in order to be able to buy large quantities of a smaller number of products, offering the customer a narrower choice, but at the same time satisfying the basic needs of the customer for coffee, flour, frozen fish or whatever it is, and being able to deliver that at a lower cost. So this emphasis on the internal analysis of the company, what can it do to achieve cost leadership, or what can it do to differentiate its products, are focused around an evaluation of the competitive advantage and disadvantages, and the instrument that we would use that, Porter suggests, is the value chain, which provides an analysis of strategically relevant value activities and their interrelationships. And you can see the basic value chain model in this line diagram below. We can then expand the line diagram in this slide to show the constituent parts, and you'll see that horizontally there are the supporting activities, which are overarching the primary activities in the lower part of the diagram, and when all of these come together, they produce a margin. I'm not going to talk about this in detail just yet. We'll talk about the detail of the model in a couple of slides' time, but I just wanted you to see the way in which the line diagram expands to encompass a number of primary and supporting activities. So the value chain model describes the categories of activities within the organization, which when taken together, brought together in harmony, are able to create the product or service that the company wishes to take to market. The value chain consists of 5 primary activities, which are all directly concerned with the creation or delivery of a product or service. If you don't do these, you don't have a product or a service. Then the 4 supporting activities help to improve the effectiveness or the efficiency of the primary activities. They are supporting and facilitating improvements in the basic core activities that the company carries out. And essentially, competitive advantage can be analysed through any of these activities. So let's now go on to have a look at the model in more detail and talk our way through each of the different component parts. So here we see the model, and at the top we see firm infrastructure. So this will be all sorts of things in terms of the number of factories we have, the location of those factories, whether we do our own distribution or whether we buy in distribution, those kind of things that actually allow us to move product around, move ideas around in a service company increasingly these days, and provide us with the linkages of one department to another to help things happen. As you can see that the firm infrastructure section here cuts right across the other elements of the support activities. We then see human resources management, which is applying people to problems within the organization and making sure that we recruit the right kind of people with the right skills, with the right attitudes, and the ability to do the job that is required, because as many organizations say today, people are our most important resource. As technology increases in importance in today's world, so we need to make sure that we can apply technology to each of these primary activities that are listed across the bottom of the model, because we need to be able to have digital solutions to each of these primary activities to ensure, yes, you guessed it, our competitive advantage. And the procurement support activity ensures that we buy in the best raw materials from the cheapest sources at the best quality to allow us to fulfill all the things that we need to do in the primary activities. So as you see, procurement intersects with inbound logistics in terms of primary activities to make sure that bringing in the raw material into the organization is an efficient process. When I worked very, very early on in my career in Scotland in a textile factory, a clothing factory that made jeans, they had a factory in the centre of a city called Dundee. And all lorries with raw material came to that factory, dropped the raw material at the back door. The raw material was then brought into the factory and processed. And then for a variety of reasons, which remain incomprehensible today, the company took on another factory which was about 5 kilometers away from the first. And this was meant to be a preparatory factory. And at that point, all inbound logistics, so all raw materials, were brought to that new factory that was actually 5 kilometers away from where the sewing of the jeans took place. The consequence of this was that, yes, we had very, very efficient receipt of fabric. We were able to do quality control on a just-in-time basis. The lorries arrived, we controlled quality, accepted the delivery, the lorry dropped the goods and went away. But then we had the problem of having to transport ourselves, at our own cost, the goods from the new factory to the old factory. So carrying the goods a whole 5 kilometers for no good reason at all. So this was not very well organized, and there was no value emerging from that activity in the value chain. You'll see also the operations activity here. I referred then a few moments ago to an experience in Scotland. And in those days, we didn't talk about operations management. We talked about production management. And increasingly since the, I would say, late 1990s, during the 2000s and certainly 2010s, operations management became much more important in the overall way of looking at the management of organizations. Operations management began to embrace all sorts of aspects of the organization's activity, not just production, but also management of inventory. They had influence on organizing sales operations. The story was that operations effectively bring about an integration of all those internal processes prior to the completion of the product and then to the outbound logistics where we actually deliver the product by lorry, or if we're delivering a service, then perhaps by a meeting or the delivery of a report. Marketing and sales then also a crucial part of what we do. Without marketing and sales, it's arguable that there is no interface to the customer. So marketing and sales provides that design activity, that finding of the niche where the product can fit before the salespeople go out and actually sign contracts to get the job done. And then, of course, the after sales service activity here, which ensures that if we have continuing contact with the customer, perhaps we are a equipment manufacturer and we need to provide service to the customer. Alternatively, we might be a brand like Mars or Coca-Cola, which wants to maintain a relationship with the customer. And that service activity is where we would maintain that customer relationship management activity. And all of these things brought together then, as you can see in the arrow end of the diagram, contribute to margin. I think it's important to look at the supporting activities and to see how they each cut across the primary activities, and that in each of them there is essentially a rectangle here, 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 for example, that show where each of the support activities interact with one of the primary activities. And that provides a functional focus, if you like, on the doing of the company and making sure that we actually deliver that cost leadership or differentiation strategy that results in sustainable competitive advantage. There are other ways to look at this model, and this is a not uncommon way. It puts the primary activities at the top, if you like, of the model, and puts the supporting activities underneath, and then has a block at the end to deal with margin. I think it doesn't really matter which way round you put it. I guess it's about the way in which your brain works. There is an argument for having the supporting activities in an overarching style, as in the first diagram, or here underneath the primary activities as a supporting activity. And when in your assignments you try to design a value chain for the solutions that you come up with, I don't think there's a preference from our side, if you like, as to which way you present the model. As long as the content makes sense and you've done the analysis for the content, then I think we'd be perfectly happy to see you delivering a value chain analysis within your assignment in either way.